are fake news? I'm sure you've heard this phrase multiple times in the news and spoken by President Donald Trump. Many of us here have probably even used the words ourselves. And you've probably even been in a conversation with your friend and used it. You see, the phrase is so common that we don't take it seriously. It's all fun and games making fun of Donald Trump. He's just that kind of guy, and we're all guilty of it. But what if I told you that he's actually onto something? What? Trump actually being smart? Now that's impossible. No, it's true. You see, fake news is an issue that is serious and dangerous to our society and to our future. We've dismissed it as a joke that we've actually contributed to the problem ourselves. Here's a quick example. It's a very simple image, but it's all part of a larger issue. You've probably been on the social media or the news, and whether this be Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, or more, and saw something that got you so fired up about an issue that you didn't stop to think. Something that made your blood boil with anger that you didn't stop to consider the other side. To put yourself in someone else's shoes and think of something opposite of yourself. And that's a part of the problem. See, I've also had this issue when I read the news, and I would think to myself, man, why do people act this way? And it's especially affected my life while I was living in the United States during the 2016 elections. I never knew what was real or fake online back then. And it's hard not to be influenced. With all the marvelous features of the smartphone, we have all the information we could ever want right at our fingertips. But there's just so much of it that we can't sift through it all. And one day I thought to myself, what do I actually mean by fake news? How can I define what is real or fake? And that's why I'm up here. Not because I've necessarily narrowed it down to a science, but because just giving you an idea to jump off from will help us all in the long run. So first of all, what's the definition of fake news? Well, for starters, it's definitely not you. You see, fake is just the adjective that describes the news. So how do we define the news? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, the news is A, a report of recent events, B, previously unknown information, or C, something having specified influence or effect. Now, this doesn't give us a lot to work with, and in fact, it's as vague as it can get for a definition of news. In fact, with this definition, it's hard to say that anything in this world isn't news currently. And our definition for fake is simple as well. It merely just means a sham or something that isn't genuine. Well then, how do we define what is true? Can we figure out what true news is based on what the definition of truth is? So then how do we define the truth? Well, I believe there is one theory that can help us with this issue. I believe that the news should correspond with the correspondence theory of truth, or the news is what is real in the world around us today. You see, this is what the news should be, giving you a report of events that are unfolding in the world around you. And this is how the news is going to be, it should be. Here's an event, here's what happened, we'll let you decide what to do with the information we've provided, and us remain neutral. So if it's this simple, why do we argue about it? Why do adults keep arguing about it? Like, seriously, this took me 10 minutes to figure out. How do we keep arguing about this type of issue? And for that, we need to dive a bit deeper. You see, with this definition, how do we know how the news developed to create this new fake news? Well, the news used to be this way. It used to give you the facts and report events that actually happened, but it doesn't do this as much anymore. And for context, I'll show you two articles. Here's the first one. Now, you can't really see any bias in the headline that would make you think a certain way. And no, it's pretty simple. It tells you about an event that happened in the world around you. And it's a pretty accurate representation of the news today. You'd be pretty hard-pressed to find any bias in the headline alone. However, this is an article from the 1970s. So here's one from today. A bit more lively, right? Uses words like fiery ruling. That makes you think, man, something really went down in that courtroom. There's also the word harsh, which just sounds awful when you come to think of it. But you are seeing this, right? Sure, it gives you the facts, but there's all this stuff in the way. There's so many opinionated adjectives sprinkled throughout it that it prevents it from remaining neutral. You can't seriously think that harsh is an objective word, can you? And yet you do. So let's dive a bit deeper. Here's someone you may know. He's a pretty famous guy. He's mostly known for his songs, but also known for his wife. But what really surprised people about him was when he came out and supported President Donald Trump. He was even invited to the White House to talk about an important issue in the United States, which is our huge incarcerated population. See, Kanye wanted to make a change with the help of the president. Seems simple enough, right? Not much to it there. Just a celebrity meeting with another celebrity president. But that's not how the media saw it. And I'm going to show you 2 articles and try to let you find the difference between them. Here's the first one. Now here's the second one. Now show of hands, who thought the first one was more interesting to read? All right, now who thought the second one was more interesting to read? They definitely don't have the same appeal, and that's for certain. But it all comes down to the language that is used. You see, in this second article by CNBC, there's a bunch of emotional and eye-catching words such as wild and tirade, that you wouldn't normally associate with a meeting between 2 people, right? It makes you think, man, what happened? What kind of grown man would throw a temper tantrum in the Oval Office? And even the description makes you think, and it catches your attention using words such as stunning and surreal. And you begin to think and wonder. You are tempted to find out what happened, and you have this urge to know what happened. So Kanye West really made a big deal in the Oval Office that's worth talking about, right? That's what CNBC said, and they're the news, right? But if that's the case, how come CNN didn't report the same thing? Why did CNN report something different? See Kanye and Trump's full White House meeting. Boring. Nobody would want to immediately read this. Even the description is not that interesting. It just tells you what happened and doesn't even mention the temper tantrum. Wait a second. Wasn't that what we defined as the news? Something that tells you the facts, but still remains neutral? So if it's this easy, how do we keep screwing it up? There had to be some sort of twist, some sort of change that made the news more eye-catching than the same exact news. So what changed? How did the factual news become this new inflammatory and controversial news? How did the facts get overshadowed by other factors? And this is simple. Money. You see, media sources are no longer treated as sources of information anymore. Instead, they're treated as an enterprise that serves as a platform for other businesses. You may have watched the news and seen advertisements during the breaks. And these companies pay the news for this time, but only if people watch it. It all comes down to views. How can I get my platform or channel the most views so we can make the most money? And the previous way of gaining information doesn't work anymore because social media is so much faster than our media outlets. So instead, the media have solved this issue by giving you something and tapping into what you will watch. Something that captivates you. Something that unknowingly forces you to cling to your screens. And they do this through emotions, politics, and rebuke. You see, nowadays, the media baits you. They give you a sliver of truth while at the same time providing information that makes you emotional. Now, they do this in different ways, but all of it prevents the truth from being in the news and makes the news farther from the truth. And this is all in a competition to get ahead of the other guy. It's a competition for your attention, and they'll do whatever it takes, regardless of whether you get the truth or not. Just look at these articles from CNN. CNN went from one narrative to the exact opposite, all in an effort to please their viewers after the 2016 election. You see, fake news is an art of manipulation, polluting the facts that you see to twist your emotions and minds. The media wants your attention because they don't want you to think. So why is this important? Why should you listen to me, a high school student, ramble on about fake news? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, I want to give you the opportunity to determine what is truth and fiction on your own. You see, by utilizing our emotions, the media is allowed to push an agenda while at the same time creating a divide, not just between what is true and fake, but between people as well. We become so rooted in what we believe that we don't stop to consider and think beyond. We form dissent and hatred for one another's views, not necessarily because we hate them, but because we just don't know otherwise. And this is called the polarization of the masses, or a deep divide between two different ideas or beliefs. And this is the consequences of allowing fake news to dictate our society. And so, if we can't do this, we lose one important issue. As we polarize, we lose one simple tool that pushes our society forward. And this is communication. And you can see this type of fake news affecting us all around the world, not just in the United States, but in places like Brazil, UK, and in parts of Europe as well. And if we, as new issues arise or worsen, and as we polarize, we'll never be able to reach an agreement because we cannot talk to one another. Our dissent prevents us from listening to one another, and we can't get anything done. It leads any mediation out of the question. We literally become a society of my way or the highway. And if important issues cannot be addressed, our future won't be pretty. See, this type of society leads down one road. As dissent leads to hatred. Hatred will ultimately lead to bloodshed. We begin to repeat history, whether it be the American Civil War and the issue of slavery, or the Spanish Civil War and the issue of political polarization. Polarization breeds violence, something we actively condemn, but actively play into with fake news. So what's the solution? How do we prevent the repetition of history? Well, we raise awareness, whether it be through education, paying for your own news sources, parental supervision, or even a speech. See, we have to be able to think for ourselves and determine if our media outlets are reliable or not. We must also listen to one another, regardless of our beliefs, opinions, political views, nationality, race, gender, etc. You see, I believe Abraham Lincoln put it perfectly 3 years before the American Civil War broke out. A house divided against itself cannot stand. We must not allow the peace we so tirelessly work to maintain to go to waste and allow freedoms to become oppressed. We have to always strive for the truth and not just accept what is presented to us on a silver platter by our media outlets. We must maintain our individuality and not allow others to determine what we think or feel. And we must divert ourselves from closed-mindedness. Only once we have recognized each perspective and accepted them will we be able to create a functioning society for the future. Thank you very much.